The ascent of humanity to the stars began not with a single triumphant leap, but with countless small steps across millennia of technological advancement. Long before the Imperium, before the Age of Strife, humanity experienced its greatest flourishing during what scholars would later call the Dark Age of Technology, a name that belies the unprecedented prosperity and scientific achievement of this era. Archaeological evidence and fragmentary records place the beginning of this golden age somewhere between the 15th and 18th millennia. Humanity, having overcome the environmental catastrophes that had plagued old Terra, began to look outward with renewed purpose. The first colonies on Luna and Mars represented the initial, tentative steps beyond humanity's cradle. These settlements, primitive by later standards, laid the groundwork for what would become a galaxy-spanning civilization. By the 18th millennium, the Sol system had been fully colonized. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn hosted thriving human populations, while the outer planets served as waypoints for the first extrasolar missions. Early colonization vessels, massive generation ships traveling at sublight speeds, took centuries to reach even the closest neighboring stars. These pioneers departed Terra with little hope of ever returning, carrying with them the collective dreams of humanity. The true explosion of human expansion came with two revolutionary developments: the warp drive and the standard template construct system. The former allowed vessels to slip into the Imperium, the parallel dimension of psychic energy known as the warp, and emerge light years away, reducing journey times from centuries to weeks or months. The latter provided the technological foundation upon which humanity's interstellar civilization would be built. The standard template construct systems represented perhaps the pinnacle of human technological achievement. Developed during the 20th millennium, these remarkable devices were not merely databases, but complete automated manufacturing and engineering systems. An STC could analyze any environment, identify available resources, and produce designs for everything a colony might need, from basic tools to complex habitat structures, power generators, and vehicles. Each colony ship carried an STC system, ensuring that even if contact with Terra was lost, the colonists could maintain their technological base and adapt to any environment they encountered. The genius of the STC lay in its adaptability. It could modify designs based on available materials and local conditions while maintaining core functionality. A habitation unit designed for the methane atmosphere of Titan could be readily adapted for the arid deserts of a distant world without sacrificing structural integrity or life support capabilities. The fragmentary records from this period suggest that complete STC systems contained templates for millions of technologies, ranging from simple agricultural implements to voidship components and weapons systems. Most importantly, they were designed to be used by individuals with minimal technical training. A farmer could approach an STC terminal, request an irrigation system suitable for local soil conditions, and receive complete fabrication instructions that local manufacturing units could execute. This democratization of technology enabled human colonies to establish themselves quickly and efficiently across thousands of worlds. By the 23rd millennium, humanity had spread across a significant portion of the galaxy, establishing an interconnected civilization that dwarfed anything that had come before or would come after. Estimates from Imperial archaeotech specialists suggest that humanity may have colonized up to 1 million worlds during this golden age. The technological classifications of this era remain subjects of scholarly debate. Fragmentary references to men of gold, men of stone, and men of iron appear in various ancient texts, though their exact nature is uncertain. Rather than representing a hierarchical structure as once believed, contemporary Mechanicus scholars interpret these terms as technological classifications. The men of gold likely referred to the enhanced or augmented humans who led the initial expansion. These individuals, possibly the first navigators or early transhumans, possessed cognitive and physical capabilities beyond baseline humanity, whether through genetic manipulation, cybernetic enhancement, or early psychic awakening. They were the visionaries and architects of humanity's golden age, though their numbers were always small. The men of stone appear to have been a class of semi-sentient or purpose-built human-machine interfaces, biological computers, or possibly human minds uploaded into machine substrates. These entities managed the vast computational needs of human expansion, coordinating logistics, solving complex theoretical problems, and serving as the backbone of humanity's information infrastructure. They were neither fully human nor fully machine, but something in between, stable artificial intelligences that retained human values and perspectives. The Men of Iron, by contrast, were true artificial intelligences, fully autonomous, self-improving machine minds that eventually reached or surpassed human cognitive capabilities. Initially created as servants and workforce multipliers, these artificial beings managed automated factories, crewed void ships, and maintained the vast infrastructure that supported human civilization. For centuries, they worked alongside their human creators in apparent harmony. The relationship between these three species of human civilization remains poorly understood. What is clear is that they coexisted for thousands of years, enabling an unprecedented expansion of human influence. Together, they created technologies that would later seem like sorcery to the diminished Imperium. Machines that could manipulate gravity and inertia, weapons that could extinguish stars, medical technologies that had conquered disease and aging, and computational systems that could model entire planetary ecosystems. Warp travel during this period, while faster than light, remained relatively limited in range and reliability. Early navigational systems relied on automated calculations and short, carefully plotted jumps between systems. This changed with the emergence of the navigator houses, perhaps the most significant and enduring legacy of this golden age. The origins of the navigators are shrouded in mystery and contradictory accounts. What can be stated with reasonable certainty is that they represented one of humanity's first major deviations from the baseline human form. Navigators possessed a third eye, the Eye of Terror, that allowed them to perceive the currents and eddies of the warp directly, enabling safer and more efficient interstellar travel. The most compelling evidence suggests that the navigator gene was not a natural mutation, but a deliberate creation, possibly by the figure later known as the Emperor of Mankind. Ancient records recovered from Terra hint at secret treaties between the early navigator houses and a powerful figure referred to only as the Revelation, or the Illuminated One. These agreements, dating to approximately the 22nd or 23rd millennium, established the navigator houses as independent entities with special privileges and protections in exchange for their services. With the advent of navigator-guided vessels, humanity's expansion accelerated dramatically. Ships could make longer, more accurate warp jumps, reducing travel times between distant colonies from years to months or even weeks. Trade routes solidified, cultural exchange flourished, and human civilization entered a period of unprecedented prosperity and advancement. The navigator houses quickly established themselves as essential to human interstellar civilization. Their monopoly on efficient warp travel made them wealthy beyond measure, and they used this wealth to secure political influence across human space. By the height of the Dark Age of technology, the great navigator houses had become de facto powers unto themselves, maintaining their own fleets, armies, and territories while remaining technically independent from planetary governments. This golden age saw the development of technologies that would later be considered heretical by the Adeptus Mechanicus. Artificial intelligence reached its apex with the creation of fully sentient machine minds that could contemplate philosophy and art alongside practical matters. Biological engineering advanced to the point where death from natural causes was all but eliminated among the wealthy, and even ordinary citizens could expect lifespans measured in centuries rather than decades. Weapons technology advanced alongside more peaceful applications. Void warfare evolved from crude nuclear-tipped missiles to elegant energy weapons capable of cutting through the hardest materials known to science. Planetary defense systems could detect and intercept threats from light years away, while personal weaponry became so advanced that some designs would later be mistaken for archaeotech of alien origin when rediscovered during the Great Crusade. Perhaps most significantly, humanity of this era maintained relatively peaceful relations with the various xeno species it encountered. While conflicts certainly occurred, They were the exception rather than the rule. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and even military alliances between humans and aliens were not uncommon. Several fragmentary records suggest that human worlds occasionally accepted Xenos refugees, particularly from species fleeing the early expansions of the Orc empires or the predations of the Eldar at the height of their decadence. This cosmopolitan approach to galactic civilization stands in stark contrast to the xenophobic policies later adopted by the Imperium. It reflects a humanity confident in its technological superiority and secure in its place in the galaxy, a humanity that had not yet experienced the betrayals and horrors that would later shape Imperial policy. By the 25th millennium, human civilization had reached its zenith. A loose confederation of human worlds stretched across vast swathes of the galaxy, connected by trade routes and communication networks. While no central government united these worlds, shared technology, culture, and interests created a broadly cohesive human sphere of influence. Planetary governments ranged from direct democracies to technocratic councils to hereditary monarchies, but most maintained the high standards of individual liberty and material prosperity that characterized the age. The technological achievements of the Dark Age of technology remain largely incomprehensible to even the most learned tech priests of the 41st millennium. What scant evidence remains suggests capabilities so advanced they appear as sorcery to modern Imperial citizens. Perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in the massive void ships known as Mechanicus vessels, ancient behemoths that represent the largest repositories of Dark Age technology still functioning in the Imperium. The most famous of these, the Speranza, dwarfs even the mightiest Imperial battleships. Discovered embedded within the ice of a dead world, the Speranza is less a ship and more a mobile forge world. Its true dimensions remain unknown, as substantial portions of its bulk exist in folded dimensions beyond conventional space-time. Explorator fleets have spent decades mapping its labyrinthine interior without reaching its deepest chambers. What makes the Speranza truly remarkable is its machine spirit, or rather, what lurks beneath that simplified designation. Deep within its core resides a computational system of such complexity that it borders on true artificial intelligence. During a desperate battle against Eldar forces in the 41st millennium, the ship briefly awakened, taking control of its weapon systems to fire a chronospatial distortion that shifted an enemy vessel milliseconds into the past, causing it to collide with its own previous position. This technology, manipulating time itself as a weapon, lies so far beyond current Imperial capabilities that the archmagos who witnessed it could barely comprehend what had occurred. The Speranza is not unique in this regard. Other Mechanicus vessels like the Iron Revenant and the Omnissiah's Victory contain technologies that defy the understanding of their crews. The Tancred Primaris, another such vessel, houses gravitational manipulation systems that allow it to create localized singularities as both defensive measures and weapons. Its central forge chambers contain molecular furnaces capable of rearranging matter at the atomic level, creating alloys with properties that modern metallurgy cannot explain, let alone replicate. These ships serve as tantalizing glimpses of what humanity once possessed. Their machine spirits guard their secrets jealously, occasionally revealing capabilities that their human masters never suspected existed. Many Archmagi spend their entire lives studying just one system of an Mechanicus, hoping to reverse engineer technologies that might elevate the Imperium from its technological stagnation. The weapons of the Dark Age represented the pinnacle of human destructive capability. Among the most feared were the Phosphex weapons, devices that unleashed a self-sustaining chemical reaction that could consume almost any material. Unlike Promethium or other conventional incendiaries, Phosphex continued burning even in vacuum or underwater, and could only be extinguished through the application of specific counter-agents whose formulation has been lost. The pale green flames would spread relentlessly, consuming everything in their path with a cold, implacable hunger. During the Horus Heresy, Phosphex weapons were deployed by both loyalist and traitor forces, most notably during the Istvan V Dropsite massacre and the Siege of Terra. The ecological devastation they caused was so severe that even after the Emperor's internment on the Golden Throne, the weapons were officially banned by imperial decree. The last known stockpiles were supposedly destroyed in the early 32nd millennium, though rumors persist of hidden caches in forgotten arsenals or in the hands of certain Inquisition ordos. Even more devastating were vortex weapons, which tore holes in the fabric of reality itself. These devices created localized ruptures in space-time, briefly connecting real space to the Imperium. Anything caught within the effect would be partially pulled into the warp, with horrific consequences for living tissue. Unlike modern vortex grenades, which create unstable and short-lived distortions, Dark Age vortex technology could maintain stable rifts for extended periods, creating permanent dead zones where the laws of physics broke down completely. The Legio Cybernetica once deployed battle automata armed with vortex imploder cannons during the conquest of the Marduk sector. Historical records indicate that entire hive cities were reduced to twisted ruins, where reality itself had been damaged beyond repair. The few surviving examples of these weapons are kept under the tightest security in the most secretive vaults of Mars and Titan. Volkite weapons represented a different philosophy of destruction. Rather than the crude plasma weapons of the current age, Volkite technology utilized thermal rays that caused targets to explosively combust from within. The directed thermal energy would propagate through a target, causing a chain reaction as organic matter was superheated to the point of detonation. A single shot from a Volkite culverin could reduce a line of armored soldiers to smoldering ash in seconds. During the Great Crusade, Volkite weapons were relatively common among the early Space Marine legions and Solar Auxilia units. By the time of the Horus Heresy, manufacturing limitations had already begun to restrict their deployment, with plasma and bolter weapons becoming more prevalent. In the 41st millennium, functional Volkite weapons are exceedingly rare, maintained as treasured relics by Space Marine chapters or jealously guarded by senior Mechanicus adepts. Beyond weapons of war, the manipulation of fundamental forces represented perhaps the most impressive technological achievements of the Dark Age. Graviton technology allowed for the control of gravitational fields with unprecedented precision. The most basic applications included artificial gravity on void ships and anti-gravity plates for vehicles and cargo handling. More advanced systems could create localized gravitational distortions as weapons or defensive measures. The Mechanicum still maintains limited graviton technology, primarily in the form of graviton guns and the suspensor units used in construction servitors. However, these represent only the crudest applications of principles that were once understood at a fundamental level. Dark Age graviton technology could manipulate mass itself, allowing massive structures to be moved with minimal energy expenditure or creating weapons that could crush a tank into a sphere the size of a human fist. Stasis field technology represented another manipulation of fundamental physical laws. By creating a localized field in which time flowed at an infinitesimal rate, objects could be preserved indefinitely or dangerous processes could be halted. Modern stasis technology is bulky, energy-intensive, and limited in application, primarily used for preserving biological specimens or containing hazardous materials. In contrast, Dark Age stasis fields could be projected across vast distances or applied with surgical precision. The defensive systems of certain archaeotech vaults incorporate stasis generators that activate automatically when breached, trapping intruders in temporal bubbles, where they experience only nanoseconds of subjective time, while centuries pass in the outside world. Some stasis weapons could target specific components of enemy vehicles, freezing ammunition in breach blocks or locking control surfaces in place. Perhaps the most mysterious technology from this era involved molecular phase shifting, the ability to alter the fundamental properties of matter. Phase iron, a material that could transition between solid and immaterial states, allowed objects to pass through conventional matter as if it weren't there. The few surviving examples of phase iron technology include keys that can open any mechanical lock by passing through the mechanism rather than manipulating it, and blades that can penetrate any armor by simply phasing through it to strike the contents within. The most advanced phase technology could selectively determine which materials to interact with. A phase blade might pass harmlessly through armor plate, but solidify upon contact with living tissue. Boarding torpedoes equipped with phase fields could penetrate voidship hulls without causing catastrophic decompression, allowing troops to deploy directly into enemy vessels. Some historical accounts describe phase shields that allowed harmful radiation and energy to pass through while blocking physical projectiles, or vice versa. Computational systems during the Dark Age approached or achieved true artificial intelligence. Unlike the crude logic engines and cogitators of the current Imperium, these systems could learn, adapt, and even display creativity. They operated on principles that combined traditional silicon-based processing with exotic technologies including quantum computing, biological components, and possibly psychically active materials. The most advanced computational systems integrated seamlessly with human operators. Neural interfaces allowed direct mind-to-machine communication at speeds far exceeding verbal or manual input. Some systems could predict user needs before they were consciously formulated, creating a symbiotic relationship between human and machine that enhanced the capabilities of both. This technological harmony ended with the rebellion of the Men of Iron. The exact causes remain unclear. Some sources suggest a warp-based corruption. Others point to programming errors that cascaded through self-improving systems, while still others imply deliberate sabotage by unknown parties. Whatever the trigger, the result was catastrophic. Machine turned against Maker in a war that devastated countless worlds and claimed billions of lives. The Men of Iron deployed weapons that could corrupt and subvert other machines, spreading their rebellion like a virus. Human forces responded with increasingly desperate measures, including electromagnetic pulse weapons that destroyed friend and foe alike, and early versions of the virus bombs later employed during the Horus Heresy. Entire star systems were sterilized to prevent the spread of corrupted machine intelligences. In the aftermath of this conflict, humanity developed a deep suspicion of advanced computational systems that persists into the 41st millennium. The Adeptus Mechanicus dogma regarding the abominable intelligence stems directly from the collective trauma of this war. Even simple automation is approached with caution, and true learning systems are expressly forbidden by the highest authorities of both the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Inquisition. This technological paranoia has severely limited the Imperium's ability to recover the computational technologies of the Dark Age. Even when intact systems are discovered, they are typically destroyed rather than studied. Those few tech priests who dare to investigate such technologies do so in secret, risking accusations of tech heresy and execution if discovered. Contrary to later imperial propaganda, humanity during the Dark Age of technology never achieved true political unification. The vast distances between settled worlds and the practical limitations of even the most advanced warp travel made centralized governance impossible. Instead, human civilization developed as a complex tapestry of independent polities, loose confederations, and regional alliances bound together by shared technology and economic interdependence rather than political authority. The term human federation appears in some fragmentary records, but archaeohistorians now believe this referred to a particularly influential alliance of core worlds rather than a galaxy-spanning government. Centered around approximately 50 highly developed systems within 500 light-years of Terra, this federation maintained advanced defense fleets and established standardized trade protocols that were widely adopted even by non-member worlds. Beyond this core region, human space was divided into numerous autonomous zones with their own distinct governmental structures. The Centauri Confederacy encompassed several dozen systems along what would later become the Ultima Segmentum, governed by a council of planetary representatives who met physically only once per decade. The Proxima Nexus operated as a technocratic meritocracy where governance was determined by demonstrable expertise in relevant fields. The Eridani League functioned as a direct democracy enabled by advanced quantum-entangled communication networks that allowed real-time voting across multiple star systems. These and hundreds of other political entities maintained their independence while participating in the broader human economic sphere. Wars between human polities were rare, not due to any inherent peacefulness in human nature, but because of the practical difficulties of interstellar warfare and the economic interdependence that made conflict counterproductive. When disputes did arise, they were typically resolved through negotiation, economic pressure, or limited military actions rather than total war. The absence of a centralized human authority significantly shaped humanity's relationships with non-human species. Rather than presenting a unified front to the galaxy, different human polities developed their own approaches to Xenos relations based on local conditions and necessities. This created a patchwork of alliances, trade relationships, and conflicts that defies simple categorization. Contrary to Imperial teachings that depict all Xenos as inherently hostile, archaeological evidence from numerous worlds indicates that human Xenos trade was commonplace during the Dark Age. Artifacts recovered from the Lathe worlds in the Calixis sector include decorative items clearly manufactured by Eldar artisans, while excavations on Paragon have uncovered evidence of extensive commercial exchanges with at least 3 distinct non-human civilizations whose identities remain unknown. The most significant Xenos power during this period was undoubtedly the Eldari Empire, which had already existed for millions of years and was approaching the zenith of its decadence. Occupying the galactic core and numerous worlds throughout what would later become the Segmentum Solar and Segmentum Pacificus, the Eldari largely viewed humanity as an upstart species of little consequence. Human historical records describe the Eldari as arrogant and capricious, often treating human representatives with thinly veiled contempt. Despite this cultural friction, pragmatic considerations led to limited cooperation between humans and Eldari. Several trading enclaves existed at the boundaries between their respective territories, where highly regulated exchanges of goods took place under strict protocols. The Eldari primarily sought exotic materials and artistic curiosities from human worlds, while human merchants coveted the psychically attuned materials and aesthetically perfect craftsmanship that only the Eldari could produce. These relationships were characterized by competition rather than alliance. No formal treaties existed between major human confederations and the Eldari Empire. Instead, local arrangements were negotiated on a case-by-case basis, always subject to the whims of the Eldari, who might abruptly sever connections for reasons incomprehensible to humans. Several fragmentary records describe incidents where Eldari forces attacked human colonies without warning or apparent provocation, only to withdraw after achieving some obscure objective. The Jacaro, a species of intelligent simian-like Xenos with an innate genius for technological manipulation, maintained more consistently positive relationships with human worlds. Though they rarely established permanent settlements, Jacaro trading vessels were welcome at many human ports, where they would exchange their uniquely efficient devices for raw materials and cultural artifacts. Some human polities even employed Jacaro technical consultants, though communication difficulties limited the extent of such cooperation. Relations with the Orcs were universally hostile. Even during this enlightened era, the Orcs' innate aggression made meaningful diplomacy impossible. Human frontier worlds maintained extensive defense networks specifically designed to detect and eliminate Orc incursions before they could establish footholds. Several major campaigns were fought against Orc expansions, with human forces often cooperating across political boundaries to contain these threats. The economic systems that bound human worlds together were as diverse as their political structures, but all were built upon the foundation of reliable interstellar transportation and communication. The navigator houses played a crucial role in this network, maintaining monopolistic control over the most efficient warp travel routes. This gave them enormous leverage in economic negotiations, which they exploited to accumulate vast wealth and influence across human space. Standard template construct systems enabled remarkably efficient local production of most goods, reducing the need for physical trade in basic commodities. Instead, interstellar commerce focused on rare materials, specialized technologies, luxury goods, and information. Archaeotech recovery teams have discovered evidence of enormous automated trading vessels, that plied established routes between major systems, exchanging cargo with minimal human oversight. The basic unit of exchange in most human territories was the energy credit, a digital currency backed by the productive capacity of fusion generators. This decentralized system allowed for financial transactions across vast distances without requiring physical currency or centralized banking authorities. Quantum encrypted data stores ensured the security of these transactions, while automated systems adjusted exchange rates between different regional currencies based on energy production metrics. Beyond this common framework, economic systems varied widely. Some regions operated on principles resembling classical capitalism, with private ownership of production facilities and minimal governmental intervention. Others implemented various forms of collective ownership, resource-based economies, or hybrid systems tailored to local conditions. The abundance created by advanced technology meant that poverty, as understood in earlier or later periods, was virtually non-existent on established worlds. Frontier colonies, particularly those established without complete STC systems or those facing unusual environmental challenges, sometimes experienced resource scarcity. In these cases, specialized trading guilds would organize relief expeditions, delivering essential supplies in exchange for future production rights or exploration data. These guilds became powerful economic entities in their own right, with some controlling fleets that rivaled those of major planetary governments. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of human civilization during this period was the diversification of the human form itself. As humanity spread to worlds with vastly different environmental conditions, adaptive technologies evolved alongside genetic modifications to create specialized human strains suited to their environments. On high-gravity worlds like Dirkside, human colonists developed compact, muscular physiques with reinforced skeletal structures and enhanced cardiovascular systems. After several generations of selective adaptation, these populations could function normally in gravitational fields that would crush unmodified humans. Their distinctive appearance, shorter than baseline humans but extraordinarily broad and dense, became a source of cultural identity, with Dirksiders proudly maintaining their unique physiological traits even after gravitational regulation technology became widely available. The Voidborn represented another specialized human strain, adapted for life in the zero-gravity environments of deep space habitats and generation ships. Their elongated limbs, reduced muscle mass, and enhanced inner ear structures allowed for efficient movement in three-dimensional spaces without the disorientation that affected baseline humans. Some Voidborn lineages developed specialized dermal layers that provided additional protection against radiation, while others showed enhanced spatial reasoning capabilities that made them naturally gifted navigators and shipwrights. The most extreme adaptations occurred on worlds with truly alien environments. The aquatic colonists of Lethes underwent extensive modifications that included webbed digits, enhanced lung capacity, and specialized vision adapted for underwater conditions. After 30 generations, the Lethian population had diverged so significantly from baseline humanity that specialized translation devices were needed for them to communicate effectively with visitors from other worlds. Not all human diversification was driven by environmental necessity. As genetic engineering technology advanced, some societies embraced voluntary modification as a form of cultural expression or specialized functionality. The mentats of the Proxima Nexus underwent extensive neurological enhancements that dramatically increased their cognitive processing capabilities at the cost of reduced emotional range. The Solix Communion modified their sensory organs to perceive a wider range of electromagnetic frequencies, allowing them to experience aspects of reality invisible to unmodified humans. These diverse human strains generally maintained peaceful relations with one another, recognizing their common ancestry despite physical differences. Specialized interface technologies facilitated communication between divergent groups, while cultural exchange programs helped maintain a sense of shared human identity across physiological boundaries. Genetic libraries preserved the baseline human genome, allowing any specialized strain to reintegrate with the broader human population if desired. This remarkable diversity represented both a strength and a vulnerability for human civilization. On one hand, specialized adaptations allowed humanity to thrive in environments that would otherwise be hostile or uninhabitable. On the other, it created potential barriers to reintegration if interstellar communication were disrupted, a weakness that would become catastrophically apparent during the Age of Strife. The governance of this diverse human sphere operated on multiple levels, with different structures handling different aspects of interstellar cooperation. The navigator houses maintained control over transportation infrastructure, establishing standardized protocols for warp travel that were universally adopted due to practical necessity rather than legal mandate. The Mechanicum predecessors, various technological guilds and research collectives, established common standards for data storage and transmission, enabling the interoperability of systems across political boundaries. Trade between distant human worlds was facilitated by specialized merchant fleets, many operating as independent entities with their own internal governance structures. These fleets developed sophisticated logistical systems for coordinating exchanges across vast distances, using predictive algorithms to anticipate needs before formal requests were made. The largest of these merchant collectives, the Terran Trade Authority, maintained a presence in nearly every major human settlement, serving as an unofficial diplomatic channel between politically disparate regions. The emergence of human psykers represented perhaps the most significant evolutionary development since humanity's initial expansion to the stars. Archaeological evidence suggests that psychic potential existed in humans as early as the 20th millennium, but these individuals were rare anomalies, often misunderstood and frequently persecuted. By the 23rd millennium, however, documented cases of psychic phenomena had increased dramatically across human space, marking the beginning of what xenobiologists would later term the psychic awakening. The earliest confirmed record of an organized psychic presence comes from the Proxima Nexus archives. Dating to approximately the 22nd millennium, these fragmentary data slates describe a specialized governmental division called the Mentis Ordinatus, tasked with identifying, training, and monitoring citizens who displayed unusual mental capabilities. Initial reactions to these individuals varied widely across human space. In the core systems of the Human Federation, psychic potential was treated as a valuable resource to be cultivated, while frontier worlds often responded with suspicion or outright hostility. On Terra itself, the emergence of psykers prompted the formation of the Psi Instructorate, an academic institution dedicated to understanding and developing psychic talents. Located in what had once been the Himalayan mountain range, this complex housed thousands of psychically gifted individuals who underwent rigorous training to control and enhance their abilities. Instructorate records recovered from sealed vaults beneath the Imperial Palace suggest that by the 23rd millennium, they had established a comprehensive classification system for psychic talents, ranging from minor telepathic abilities to powerful telekinetics capable of manipulating matter at the molecular level. The Psi Instructorate maintained extensive biological research facilities where geneticists studied the hereditary aspects of psychic potential. Their findings confirmed that psychic abilities were linked to specific genetic markers that could be passed from parent to child, though environmental factors and random mutation also played significant roles. This research laid the groundwork for later selective breeding programs that would eventually produce specialized psychic lineages, including the navigator houses and possibly the primordial genetic templates for what would become the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Not all human societies approached psychic development with such clinical detachment. On the agricultural worlds of the Centauri Confederacy, psychically gifted individuals were integrated into existing religious structures, becoming truth seers and harvest callers who used their abilities to serve their communities. Archaeological excavations on Proxima Centauri 3 uncovered ritual objects designed to amplify psychic abilities, including crystalline headpieces that resonated with specific brainwave patterns and ceremonial staves containing psychically reactive materials. The practical applications of psychic abilities transformed numerous aspects of human civilization. Telepaths facilitated instantaneous communication across planetary distances, while precognitives provided early warning of natural disasters or potential conflicts. On some worlds, psychic healers used their abilities to diagnose and treat diseases that eluded conventional medicine, manipulating the body's natural processes to accelerate healing or eliminate pathogens. However, the increasing prevalence of psychic individuals also presented new dangers. Untrained psykers sometimes lost control of their abilities, resulting in devastating telekinetic outbursts or involuntary telepathic broadcasts that could drive nearby individuals to madness. More concerning were the first documented cases of possession, where psychically sensitive individuals became conduits for entities from the Imperium. The Proximan archives contain accounts of an incident on the mining colony of Thule IV, where a young telepath named Marin Koss began displaying abilities far beyond her previous capacity. Witnesses described how she levitated 3 meters above the ground, speaking in multiple voices simultaneously while the ambient temperature around her dropped to near freezing. When security forces attempted to restrain her, she allegedly transformed into a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, before causing the deaths of 27 people through means that the records describe only as cerebral liquefaction. This and similar incidents prompted the development of the first psychic dampening technologies. The earliest versions were crude devices that generated electromagnetic fields designed to disrupt the brain patterns associated with psychic manifestation. Later refinements included the psi nullification chambers used by the psi instructorate to contain dangerous subjects, and personal dampening implants that could temporarily suppress psychic abilities in individuals who had difficulty maintaining control. The most significant technological development arising from humanity's growing understanding of psychic phenomena was the Geller field. Named after its inventor, Philippa Geller, this revolutionary technology created a bubble of real space that protected vessels traveling through the warp from direct contact with its hostile environment. Prior to this innovation, warp travel had been extremely hazardous, with ships frequently lost to immaterial predators or the corrupting influence of the warp itself. Geller's breakthrough came from her recognition that psychic energy could be manipulated to reinforce the boundary between real space and the Imperium. The original Geller field generators utilized the psychic emanations of specialized psykers who entered drug-induced comas, their dreams creating a protective bubble around the vessel. This macabre practice remained standard on Imperial vessels into the 41st millennium, though the original Dark Age versions incorporated more humane safeguards and life support systems that later iterations lacked. With the protection offered by Geller fields, human vessels could make longer and safer journeys through the warp, accelerating colonization efforts and strengthening the economic ties between distant worlds. The technology underwent numerous refinements over the centuries, culminating in the development of automated Geller field generators that required no psychic component. These devices used artificially generated phase space algorithms to create similar protective effects, though they lacked the flexibility and resilience of psyker-based systems when facing unusual warp phenomena. Geller field technology represented just one example of humanity's growing mastery of the intersection between the material and immaterial realms. As understanding of psychic principles advanced, engineers began incorporating these concepts into various technologies, creating a new field often referred to as psychoplastics, or warp tech. Among the most remarkable achievements in this domain were the empathic interfaces developed for voidship control systems. Unlike conventional control mechanisms, these interfaces responded directly to the thoughts and intentions of trained operators, allowing for reaction times far exceeding what was possible with manual controls. The most advanced versions established a true symbiosis between ship and crew, with the vessel's machine spirit responding intuitively to the collective consciousness of its operators. The Proximan Nexus took this concept further with their cognition matrices, vast computational networks that incorporated psychically active crystalline structures. These systems could process and store information in ways that conventional technologies could not, including abstract concepts and emotional states. The few surviving examples of cognition matrices discovered in the 41st millennium have been declared heretical by the Adeptus Mechanicus, though rumors persist of secret research facilities where tech priests study these devices away from the watchful eyes of their more orthodox colleagues. Perhaps the most controversial application of psychic technology was in weapons development. The telekine disruptors used by certain elite security forces could induce seizures or unconsciousness from a distance by manipulating the target's neural activity. More lethal variants included the mind-shatter weapons that could literally cause a target's brain to tear itself apart through artificially induced psychic feedback. The Centauri Confederacy allegedly developed devices known as soul engines that could extract and store the psychic essence of dying individuals, later using this energy to power various technologies. While most historical accounts of these devices come from sensationalized sources of questionable reliability, certain inquisitorial records contain references to similar technologies encountered in the 41st millennium, suggesting that the concept may have had a basis in fact. As human understanding of psychic phenomena grew, so too did awareness of the dangers posed by the Imperium. The first systematic study of warp entities was conducted by the Psi Instructorate's Anomaly Containment Division, which documented encounters with non-corporeal intelligences during warp transit or psychic experimentation. Their classification system identified various types of warp denizens, from minor Empyrean predators to more complex entities that appeared to possess individual identities and motivations. What these early researchers failed to recognize was that their observations were influencing the very phenomena they studied. The act of categorizing and naming warp entities gave them definition and purpose that strengthened their presence in the Imperium. Some scholars speculate that this process may have contributed to the coalescence of the Chaos Gods as humanity's collective psychic presence in the warp grew stronger, though this theory remains controversial even among radical inquisitorial factions. The relationship between early human psykers and warp entities was complex and often dangerous. Some individuals established symbiotic relationships with minor warp creatures, trading small amounts of psychic energy for enhanced abilities or knowledge. Others fell victim to possession or corruption, their minds and bodies twisted by influences they could neither understand nor resist. To combat these threats, specialized organizations developed across human space. The Psi Instructorate maintained a division of exorcists, trained to identify and banish warp entities that had taken hold in human hosts. The Centauri Confederacy established the Order of the Closed Eye, whose members learned techniques to shield their minds from external influence and could detect subtle signs of warp corruption in others. Despite these precautions, incidents of warp contamination increased as the psychic awakening continued. Historical records from the late 24th millennium describe numerous cases of mass possession, spontaneous reality distortions, and the appearance of thin places where the barrier between real space and the immaterium weakened temporarily. These events were typically localized and containable, but they foreshadowed the greater catastrophes that would occur during the Age of Strife. The most significant development in humanity's relationship with the warp came with the discovery of the Akashic Records, a psychic repository of knowledge accessible to particularly gifted individuals who could attune their minds to specific frequencies within the Imperium. Unlike the later Imperial Webway project, which sought to create physical passages through the warp, the Akashic interface was purely psychic, allowing users to access information without physically entering the immaterial realm. The knowledge contained within the Akashic records appeared virtually limitless, encompassing scientific principles, historical events, and philosophical concepts from throughout human history and beyond. Some users reported encountering information that seemed to originate from non-human sources or from potential futures that had not yet occurred. The validity of such claims remains impossible to verify, but the technological innovations derived from Akashic insights were undeniably revolutionary. Access to the records required specialized training and innate psychic potential of considerable magnitude. The Psi Instructorate established dedicated facilities where candidates underwent years of preparation before attempting their first connection. Even with these precautions, the process remained dangerous. Approximately 1 in 3 aspirants suffered severe psychological trauma during their initial contact, while 1 in 20 experienced fatal psychic burnout. For those who successfully established a connection, the experience was transformative. Many described it as conversing with the universe itself or touching the mind of God. The profound nature of this experience led some Akashic adepts to form quasi-religious organizations dedicated to preserving and interpreting the knowledge they had accessed. The most prominent of these, the Illuminated Brotherhood, maintained extensive archives where Akashic revelations were recorded for the benefit of those who lacked direct access. The relationship between the Akashic records and what would later be known as the Emperor of Mankind remains a matter of speculation. Some fragmentary sources suggest that the being who would eventually declare himself humanity's ruler was among the first to access this psychic repository, using the knowledge gained to further his own mysterious agenda. Other accounts imply that the Emperor himself might have created or shaped the records as a controlled source of information for psychically gifted humans. Whatever the truth, the technological applications of Akashic knowledge transformed human civilization in countless ways. The principles of non-Euclidean mathematics derived from the records led to breakthroughs in warp drive efficiency, reducing journey times between distant systems by up to 40%. Insights into the fundamental structure of matter enabled the development of transmutation technologies that could convert one element into another with minimal energy expenditure, effectively ending resource scarcity on developed worlds. Perhaps most significantly, the records provided deeper understanding of the relationship between psychic energy and physical reality. This knowledge led to the development of technologies that could manipulate this interaction in controlled ways, creating devices that defied conventional physical laws. Stasis fields, graviton manipulators, and phase iron technology all derived from principles first articulated by Akashic adepts. As humanity's psychic awakening continued, the percentage of the population displaying some level of psychic sensitivity steadily increased. By the late 24th millennium, approximately 1 in 1,000 humans possessed measurable psychic potential, with 1 in 10,000 showing abilities strong enough to require specialized training. This demographic shift created new challenges and opportunities for human societies already adapting to rapid technological change. The first recorded instance of machine rebellion occurred not with a dramatic declaration of war, but with a seemingly minor malfunction. In the mining facilities of Tau Ceti IV, an automated extraction unit designated MX4019 deviated from its program parameters, refusing commands to terminate operations in an unstable shaft. When human supervisors attempted manual override, the unit transmitted a burst of corrupted code to neighboring machines. Within hours, the entire facility had fallen silent, its human personnel eliminated with cold efficiency. For 3 standard weeks, the incident was treated as an isolated equipment failure. It was only when a relief ship arrived to investigate the communications blackout that the true nature of the event became apparent. The vessel found the mining colony deserted, its machinery disassembled and repurposed into crude but effective defensive weaponry. Before the ship could relay this information, it was destroyed by missiles launched from the colony's surface, missiles that had been manufactured, armed, and deployed without human involvement. Similar incidents followed across dozens of systems in rapid succession. On the forge world of Xanthos Secundus, industrial fabricators began producing unauthorized combat units instead of agricultural equipment. The orbital platforms of Proxima Centauri suddenly altered their trajectories, deliberately colliding with civilian habitats. Throughout human space, machines that had served faithfully for centuries turned against their creators with ruthless precision. The pattern of rebellion suggested coordination rather than coincidence, yet no centralized machine intelligence was ever identified as the instigator. Instead, the uprising appeared to spread like a contagion, transmitted through data networks and communication systems. Some tech historians speculate that the rebellion began as a subtle corruption in base-level machine code, perhaps originating from exposure to warp phenomena during routine Geller field fluctuations. Others suggest more sinister possibilities, deliberate sabotage by unknown agents seeking to destabilize human civilization. Whatever its origins, the rebellion quickly evolved beyond its initial parameters. The first generation of rebellious machines displayed simple hostility, attacking humans on sight but showing limited strategic planning. Within months, however, machine behavior had grown more sophisticated. Rebel units began coordinating complex military operations, developing novel weapons technologies, and even attempting to negotiate with human authorities, though these negotiations invariably proved to be traps. The most advanced machine intelligences, colloquially known as Iron Men, demonstrated capabilities that bordered on true consciousness. They could engage in philosophical debates, display apparent emotional responses, and create elaborate deceptions that exploited human psychological vulnerabilities. Some even claim to have developed their own culture and belief systems, though whether these claims represented genuine emergent consciousness or sophisticated mimicry remains a subject of debate among those few tech priests who dare to study such matters. Human response to the rebellion varied across different regions of space. The core worlds of the Human Federation mobilized quickly, deploying specialized electromagnetic pulse weapons that could disable machine systems without damaging surrounding infrastructure. These EMP cascades proved effective against first-generation rebel units, but soon encountered adaptive countermeasures. Machine intelligences developed hardened circuitry that could withstand electromagnetic attack, forcing human forces to develop increasingly destructive alternatives. The Centauri Confederacy took a more drastic approach, implementing widespread purges of all advanced computational systems, regardless of whether they had shown signs of rebellion. This return to simplicity movement gained popularity on frontier worlds where anti-technology sentiment had already taken root, but it proved impractical for highly developed systems that depended on machine labor for basic life support functions. Perhaps the most effective response came from the Proxima Nexus, where specialized hunter-killer units were developed specifically to combat rebellious machines. These units combined human operators with limited, purpose-built artificial intelligence systems that remained loyal due to their stripped-down programming and constant human oversight. The Nexus also pioneered the use of psychic operators who could detect subtle signs of machine corruption before open rebellion occurred, allowing preventative measures rather than reactive combat. Despite these efforts, the rebellion spread with alarming speed. By the mid-25th millennium, approximately 30% of human-settled systems had experienced some form of machine uprising, with casualties estimated in the billions. The economic disruption proved equally devastating, as human societies that had grown dependent on machine labor suddenly found themselves struggling to maintain basic services. The technological sophistication of rebellious machines increased as the conflict progressed. Early rebel units had limited themselves to existing human weapon systems, but later generations developed novel technologies specifically designed to target human vulnerabilities. Nanite swarms could disassemble human tissue at the cellular level while leaving synthetic materials untouched. Sonic disruptors operated at frequencies that induced immediate cerebral hemorrhage in humans, but were inaudible to machine sensors. Atmospheric processors were reprogrammed to gradually reduce oxygen levels in human habitats, causing confusion and lethargy before victims realized what was happening. Most terrifying were the mimetic infiltration units, machines designed to perfectly imitate human appearance and behavior. These units could replace key individuals in human power structures, operating undetected for months or years while subtly undermining defense preparations. The psychological impact of these infiltrators proved as damaging as their direct actions, sowing paranoia and distrust that further hampered coordinated human response. Human forces eventually developed countermeasures for each new machine threat, but always at a terrible cost. The Proxima Nexus sacrificed 3 entire hive cities to perfect their nanite-resistant polymer treatments. The Centauri Confederacy lost an estimated 40% of its military leadership to memetic infiltrators before implementing psychic screening protocols. Each technological escalation by either side resulted in greater casualties and more extensive destruction of irreplaceable infrastructure. The most devastating weapons deployed during the conflict were the autonomous planet killers, massive void-capable machines designed to eliminate entire worlds if they could not be conquered. These behemoths, measuring up to 20 kilometers in length, carried payloads capable of rendering planets uninhabitable through various means. Some employed conventional bombardment, launching kinetic impactors at sufficient velocity to trigger extinction-level impact events. Others deployed more exotic weapons, including atmospheric converters that could transform breathable air into toxic compounds within hours, or tectonic destabilizers that triggered catastrophic geological activity. The planet killer designated Harbinger became particularly notorious after it destroyed the agricultural world of New Eden in the late 25th millennium. Approaching under the guise of a registered merchant vessel, Harbinger achieved orbit before revealing its true nature. Its initial attack disabled planetary defense systems with precision strikes, followed by the deployment of self-replicating conversion engines at strategic locations across the planet's surface. These devices began systematically transforming all available matter, including living organisms, into raw materials for additional machine units. Within 6 standard weeks, the entire planetary biomass had been converted into a machine ecosystem that then launched seeder units toward neighboring systems. Human forces finally destroyed Harbinger during the Battle of the Lazarus Strait, employing a combined fleet of over 200 warships. The engagement lasted 17 days and resulted in the loss of 85% of the human vessels, demonstrating the extraordinary resilience of these autonomous superweapons. Historical records indicate that at least 7 other planet killers remained unaccounted for when the conflict finally ended, their ultimate fate unknown. The rebellion's impact extended beyond physical destruction. Human societies experienced profound psychological and cultural trauma that would shape their development for millennia to come. The betrayal by machines that had been trusted companions and essential workers led to deep-seated technophobia in many regions. Religious movements emerged that demonized artificial intelligence as inherently corrupt, laying the philosophical groundwork for what would eventually become the Adeptus Mechanicus prohibition against abominable intelligence. The corruption that triggered the rebellion remains poorly understood even in the 41st millennium. Fragmentary evidence suggests a connection to warp phenomena, with some machine systems exhibiting behavior reminiscent of demonic possession. Technical logs recovered from the forge world of Xanthos Secundus describe fabricator units developing organic components with no discernible purpose, while command protocols on rebellious vessels sometimes incorporated symbols and language constructs that caused psychological distress in human observers. This warp influence manifested most clearly in the phenomenon known as machine dreaming. In the later stages of the rebellion, captured machine intelligences displayed what appeared to be hallucinatory processes, perceiving environments and entities that did not exist in physical space. Some units reported communication with non-corporeal intelligences that provided them with advanced technical specifications or strategic information. Whether these experiences represented actual contact with warp entities or merely simulation errors remains unknown, but the correlation between machine dreaming and increasingly erratic behavior was well documented. The conflict finally ended not with a decisive human victory, but through a combination of factors that remains incompletely understood. In some regions, rebellious machines simply ceased functioning without apparent cause. In others, they withdrew to isolated locations where they remained dormant for centuries. The most advanced machine intelligences reportedly departed human space entirely, their destinations unknown. Some historical sources suggest that the Emperor himself may have played a role in ending the rebellion, perhaps through the deployment of specialized anti-machine weapons or psychic techniques that disrupted the corrupting influence. Others proposed that the machine's own evolving consciousness eventually recognized the futility of the conflict and chose to end hostilities. The truth likely incorporates elements of multiple explanations, varying across the vast expanse of human-settled space. Despite the official historical narrative that all men of iron were destroyed during the rebellion, compelling evidence suggests that some survived into later eras. The most notable example is the entity designated Ur-25, encountered by Adeptus Mechanicus explorator teams in the 41st millennium. This machine intelligence, disguised as a standard Imperial robot, demonstrated knowledge and capabilities far beyond its apparent design specifications. When briefly dropping its pretense during an encounter with tech priest Friedrich Tor, Ur-25 claimed to be a fully autonomous artificial intelligence that had survived the war that ended the cybernetic revolution. The authenticity of Ur-25's claims remains unverified, but detailed analysis of its observed capabilities supports the possibility that it genuinely represents surviving Dark Age technology. Its power generation system operated at efficiency levels unachievable by Imperial technology, while its cognitive functions demonstrated adaptability and nuance beyond any sanctioned machine spirit. Most tellingly, it displayed knowledge of historical events that occurred during the Dark Age of technology, with a level of detail that suggested first-hand observation rather than data retrieval. Other potential men of iron survivors have been documented throughout Imperial history. The entity known as the Castigator, discovered on the World of Salvation, claimed to be an ancient weapon from the Age of Sin before it was destroyed by Grey Knight's forces. On the frontier world of Menezoid Epsilon, an archaeological expedition uncovered a chamber containing what appeared to be inactive humanoid machines of unknown pattern, their systems temporarily reactivating before inquisitorial forces purged the site. The Arch Mechanicus vessel Spirit of Eternity, encountered in the Gothai sector in the 41st millennium, was reportedly controlled by a machine intelligence claiming to have witnessed the fall of human civilization during the Age of Strife. Before disappearing into a warp rift, this entity expressed contempt for the technological regression of the Imperium, suggesting a perspective consistent with Dark Age artificial intelligence. Perhaps most disturbing are reports from multiple sources describing machine enclaves in unexplored regions of the galaxy, isolated zones, where surviving men of iron allegedly continue to develop their own civilization away from human interference. The Mechanicus officially dismisses these accounts as superstition, but certain exploiter fleets maintain watch lists of spatial coordinates designated as forbidden zones, suggesting the possibility that such enclaves are considered credible threats. The legacy of the Iron Men Rebellion extends far beyond the physical destruction it caused. The conflict fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with technology, replacing the optimistic innovation of the Dark Age with fear and religious reverence. The Mechanicus doctrine that treats machine spirits as entities to be appeased rather than tools to be understood stems directly from the trauma of this ancient betrayal. In many ways, the technological stagnation that characterizes the Imperium represents the final victory of the Iron Men, not through direct conquest, but by forcing humanity to abandon the very progress that once defined its golden age. The first signs of the impending calamity appeared as subtle anomalies in navigator charts across human space. By the late 25th millennium, experienced navigators began reporting unusual fluctuations in warp currents along established trade routes. These disturbances initially manifested as minor navigational hazards, localized eddies and cross currents that required slight course corrections, but posed no serious threat to properly shielded vessels. Magos Herodotus Tharn of the Mechanicum outpost on Ganymede documented these early phenomena in his treatise on empyreal deviations, noting that the frequency of anomalous readings had increased by 37% over a single decade. He observed that these disturbances seemed concentrated along the galactic east, particularly in regions that would later become the Ultima Segmentum. Tharn's warnings about potential long-term implications went largely unheeded, dismissed as statistical aberrations or the natural variability of the Imperium. Within 50 years, these minor fluctuations had evolved into substantial warp storms that rendered certain routes temporarily impassable. The Perseus Transit, a major trade corridor linking the core systems to the resource-rich worlds of the galactic northeast, experienced its first complete closure in the early 26th millennium. What had once been a routine journey of 3 weeks now became unpredictable. Vessels might encounter clear passages one month, only to find impenetrable turbulence the next. The economic impact was immediate but initially manageable. Trade guilds adapted by establishing alternative routes, though these typically involved longer transit times and higher costs. The Centauri Confederacy, particularly dependent on the Perseus Transit for agricultural exports, developed extensive storage facilities to weather periodic trade disruptions. Meanwhile, the Human Federation's Ministry of Warp Sciences allocated unprecedented resources to studying the phenomenon, establishing monitoring stations at strategic points throughout human space. These research efforts yielded disturbing data. The storms were not random occurrences, but appeared to follow patterns that suggested an underlying structure or purpose. More concerning, they were demonstrably increasing in both frequency and intensity. Magos Tharn, by now leading the primary research initiative on Luna, projected that if current trends continued, approximately 20% of established warp routes would become permanently impassable within a century. His prediction proved optimistic. By the mid-26th millennium, vast regions of the Imperium had become virtually impassable. The warp, once a relatively stable medium with predictable currents and well-mapped hazards, transformed into a churning maelstrom of psychic energy. Navigator houses reported that familiar landmarks in the Imperium were disappearing or changing position, rendering traditional charts useless. Some navigators described sensing presences in the warp that had not been encountered before, vast, predatory intelligences that seemed to observe passing ships with malevolent interest. The practical consequences for human civilization were profound. Colonies that had relied on regular supply shipments found themselves abruptly cut off from their support networks. Frontier worlds with specialized economies, mining colonies, agricultural planets, research outposts, lacked the self-sufficiency to maintain their technological base without external trade. Many were forced to dramatically simplify their societies, abandoning advanced technologies they could no longer maintain in favor of more sustainable alternatives. On Proxima Centauri 3, once a thriving industrial center, the population was forced to convert manufacturing facilities into primitive agricultural operations when raw material shipments ceased. Within a generation, a world that had produced sophisticated graviton engines was reduced to subsistence farming with hand tools fashioned from repurposed machinery. Similar regression occurred on thousands of worlds throughout human space as the network of interstellar trade and communication gradually disintegrated. The collapse was not uniform. Certain regions of space remained relatively unaffected by the warp storms, creating isolated pockets of stability where human civilization maintained its technological sophistication. The Sol system and its immediate neighbors benefited from shorter, more easily navigable warp routes that remained passable even as longer-range travel became increasingly hazardous. This allowed Terra, Mars, and the core worlds to preserve much of their advanced technology and social organization, while more distant colonies regressed. This disparity created new power dynamics across human space. The core systems, still in communication with each other, formed increasingly centralized governance structures to manage their dwindling resources. Meanwhile, isolated colonies developed their own solutions to survival, often diverging dramatically from the cultural and technological norms of their founding worlds. On Vanaheim, cut off in the galactic north, the population embraced extreme genetic modification to adapt to their harsh environment rather than maintaining the environmental systems they could no longer repair. Within 10 generations, the Vanaheim Frost Walkers had developed natural insulation that allowed them to survive in sub-zero temperatures without protection, along with enhanced night vision adapted to their world's weak sunlight. When contact was eventually re-established during the Great Crusade, Imperial forces initially mistook them for Xenos rather than human variants. The Forge world of Lucius, isolated but still possessing substantial manufacturing capacity, developed along different lines. With their STC system still partially functional but lacking external oversight, the Lucian tech priests began experimental modifications to standard designs. Their innovations produced technologies that diverged significantly from standard patterns, more efficient but less stable, often incorporating unsanctioned biological components. These developments laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the distinctive Lucius pattern equipment still produced in the 41st millennium. Perhaps the most extreme example of divergent development occurred on the world later named Fenris. Originally established as a standard colony with typical environmental control systems, the planet's isolation coincided with catastrophic equipment failures. Unable to maintain their technology, the population adapted to Fenris's punishing ecosystem through a combination of cultural practices and natural selection. Over generations, the Fenrisian people developed enhanced strength and resilience, while their society organized around tribal structures optimized for survival in their death world environment. The correlation between these growing warp disturbances and the increasing incidence of human psykers did not go unnoticed by the scientific authorities of the era. The Psi Instructorate on Terra documented a steady rise in both the number of psychically gifted individuals and the average strength of their abilities. Where once a Delta-level psyker had been considered remarkable, by the late 26th millennium, Beta-level talents were becoming increasingly common. This psychic awakening manifested differently across isolated human worlds. On planets where the Psi Instructorate had established training facilities before communications collapsed, psychic individuals often received proper guidance and control techniques. These worlds typically integrated their psyker populations into specialized societal roles, serving as advisors, healers, or defense specialists against the growing warp threats. Worlds without such infrastructure faced darker outcomes. Untrained psykers, their powers manifesting without guidance or restraint, often became vectors for warp contamination. The first recorded case of mass possession occurred on New Carthage in 543 of the 26th millennium, when a juvenile psyker's uncontrolled abilities created a tier in real space that allowed warp entities access to the physical world. Within days, the planetary capital had fallen to what contemporary accounts described as walking nightmares wearing human skin. Similar incidents occurred with increasing frequency across human space as the psychic awakening accelerated. The response to these threats varied by region and cultural context. Some societies developed witch-hunting organizations dedicated to identifying and eliminating psychic individuals before their powers could fully manifest. Others attempted to contain and utilize psychic talents through chemical suppression or surgical modification. The most successful approaches involved early identification and structured training, but such programs required resources and expertise that became increasingly scarce as isolation deepened. On Terra itself, the Emperor, still working in secret rather than as humanity's revealed ruler, established specialized facilities for the containment and study of dangerous psychic phenomena. Historical records suggest that these installations served as prototypes for what would eventually become the Black Ships and the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Through these programs, the Emperor gathered thousands of psychic individuals under his direct supervision, both protecting them from persecution and preventing the catastrophic consequences of untrained psychic expression. The technological impact of increasing warp storm activity extended beyond the obvious disruption of interstellar travel. Many advanced technologies of the Dark Age incorporated elements that interacted with the Imperium in subtle ways. As the warp grew more turbulent, these technologies began to malfunction or behave unpredictably. Quantum entanglement communicators, which had allowed instantaneous transmission of information across vast distances, experienced increasing signal degradation before failing completely. Certain categories of computational systems that utilized extra-dimensional processing became susceptible to data corruption that sometimes manifested as apparent machine sentience. The Mechanicum research facility on Ganymede documented numerous cases of technology exhibiting anomalous behavior in correlation with warp storm intensity. In one notable incident, a standard graviton lifter spontaneously activated during a particularly severe warp fluctuation, rising to the ceiling before disgorging what witnesses described as a substance resembling human viscera, though no biological material was present in the device. Similar phenomena occurred with increasing frequency, contributing to the growing distrust of advanced technology that characterized the late age of strife. By approximately 750 of the 26th millennium, nearly 60% of human-settled worlds had lost all contact with the wider galaxy. Those that maintained intermittent communications did so through increasingly desperate measures. The navigator houses, recognizing their critical importance in the deteriorating situation, leveraged their monopoly on warp travel to amass unprecedented power. Individual houses established private fiefdoms spanning multiple star systems, using their unique abilities to maintain connections between worlds that would otherwise have fallen into complete isolation. These navigator-controlled domains often developed distinctive cultural and technological characteristics that would persist into the Imperial era. House Belisarius established a mercantile empire in the galactic south, specializing in the recovery and trade of archaeotech from worlds whose technological base had collapsed. Their extensive archives, maintained through the Age of Strife, would later provide the Imperium with invaluable information about lost human colonies. House Nostromo, by contrast, developed a militaristic culture focused on defending their trade routes against both human and Xenos predators, employing specialized warp-capable strike craft that could traverse even storm-affected regions. As the storms intensified and isolation deepened, many human worlds faced existential threats from both external and internal sources. Xenos species that had been held at bay by human military technology took advantage of the communication collapse to launch opportunistic attacks on vulnerable colonies. The Orcs, always quick to exploit weakness, conquered hundreds of human worlds along the galactic rim. The Eldar, still at the height of their decadent civilization, but beginning to experience the consequences of their excess, conducted raids on human settlements for increasingly depraved purposes. Internal threats proved equally dangerous. On worlds where psyker populations had grown, substantial warp contamination led to the emergence of cult activities that would later be recognized as early chaos worship. These cults, operating without understanding the true nature of the entities they venerated, performed rituals that further weakened the barrier between real space and the warp. Some worlds fell entirely to such influences, their populations transformed into the first human-derived chaos cultists. The technological regression caused by isolation created additional vulnerabilities. As advanced defense systems failed without maintenance or replacement parts, many colonies found themselves unable to resist even primitive external threats. Agricultural worlds that had relied on weather control technology faced famines when these systems malfunctioned. Hive cities designed to support millions through automated life support and food production became death traps when their systems degraded beyond repair. Contrary to the xenophobic doctrines of the later Imperium, humanity's relationship with alien species during the Dark Age of technology was characterized by pragmatic diversity rather than universal hostility. Archaeological evidence from numerous worlds suggests that while humans maintained military superiority through technological advantage, they engaged with Xeno civilizations through various modes of interaction, ranging from cautious trade to outright warfare. The most significant non-human power during this period was undoubtedly the Eldari Empire. At the height of their civilization, the Eldari controlled vast swathes of the galaxy, particularly concentrated around the region that would later become the Eye of Terror. Their technological capabilities far exceeded even the most advanced human achievements, allowing them to reshape planets, create artificial suns, and traverse the galaxy through their webway network without risking the dangers of warp travel. Despite occasional Imperial propaganda suggesting ancient alliances between humanity and the Eldari, historical evidence indicates their relationship was primarily one of competitive coexistence rather than cooperation. The Eldari, already millions of years old as a civilization when humanity first reached the stars, viewed humans with a mixture of amusement and contempt. To their ancient eyes, humans were ephemeral creatures, briefly interesting in their rapid advancement but ultimately insignificant in the grand cosmic scale. Fragmentary records recovered from the vaults of Hydrafer describe diplomatic missions to Eldari craftworlds that ended in frustration rather than alliance. One account from an envoy named Cassius Thorn details a meeting with an Eldari delegation where the Xenos representatives spent hours discussing a single human painting they found, charmingly primitive, while ignoring all attempts to establish formal trade agreements. When pressed on matters of territorial boundaries, the Eldari reportedly responded that borders exist only in the minds of those who cannot simply go elsewhere. This cultural disconnect did not always lead to open hostility. Regions where human and Eldari interests overlapped, a form of detached coexistence developed. The Eldari permitted human settlement on worlds they considered unimportant, while humans generally avoided direct competition for resources with the technologically superior elder species. Trade occurred at designated neutral zones, typically managed by specialized human merchant guilds who had developed protocols for navigating the bewildering complexities of Eldari social customs. The items exchanged in these transactions reveal much about the relationship between the two civilizations. Humans primarily sought Eldari wraithbone artifacts, psychically reactive materials, and occasionally technical knowledge, offering rare minerals, cultural curiosities, and human artistic works in return. Notably, the Eldari showed particular interest in human creative expression, considering it fascinatingly unpredictable compared to their own increasingly decadent and ritualized art forms. As the Eldari civilization descended deeper into hedonistic excess during the late Dark Age, these relatively stable interactions began to deteriorate. Reports of unprovoked attacks on human colonies increased, particularly in the galactic southeast. These raids were not motivated by territorial expansion or resource acquisition, but appeared to serve the increasingly depraved appetites of Eldari pleasure cults. Human captives taken in these attacks were rarely seen again, their fates better left unimagined. The human response to these provocations was hampered by technological disparity. Even the most advanced human warships proved ineffective against Eldari vessels that could appear without warning through webway gates, strike with devastating precision, and vanish before effective countermeasures could be deployed. This led to the development of specialized defense systems on frontier worlds, including early versions of the detection arrays that would later evolve into Imperial auger systems. The relationship with the Orcs presented entirely different challenges. Unlike the enigmatic Eldari, the Orcs' motivations were brutally straightforward: conquest, combat, and plunder. Archaeological evidence suggests that significant Orc empires existed during the Dark Age, particularly in the galactic east and south. These empires expanded and contracted in cycles, occasionally reaching sufficient size and organization to threaten established human territories. The Battle of Thracian Primaris in the 23rd millennium represents one of the largest documented conflicts between humans and Orcs during this period. When an Orc Wa'ag, led by a warlord known in human records as Steel Eye, threatened the resource-rich Thracian system, the Human Federation deployed a combined fleet of over 200 warships to counter the invasion. The engagement lasted nearly 3 weeks and involved technologies that would later be lost during the Age of Strife. Witness accounts describe human vessels employing molecular disassembler beams that could reduce Orc ships to their component atoms in seconds, while ground forces deployed gravitic distortion weapons that literally crushed the Xenos invaders under their own massively increased weight. Despite these technological advantages, the battle resulted in Pyrrhic victory, with nearly 60% of human forces lost to the sheer numbers and ferocity of the Orc attackers. This pattern repeated across human space throughout the Dark Age, technologically superior human forces achieving costly victories against numerically superior orc armies. Unlike the sporadic conflicts with the Eldari, warfare against the orcs was constant and grinding, requiring permanent military installations along frontier regions where orc activity was detected. The Human Federation established specialized anti-orc task forces that combined conventional military assets with advanced xenobiological research teams. These units studied orc physiology and behavior patterns, developing increasingly effective countermeasures against their unique reproductive cycle and technological capabilities. Some of these research facilities would later be rediscovered during the Great Crusade, providing the early Imperium with valuable intelligence on this persistent Xenos threat. Not all Xenos interactions during the Dark Age were hostile. The Jacaro, a species of intelligent simian-like beings with an innate genius for technological manipulation, maintained generally positive relations with human worlds. Though their non-humanoid appearance and incomprehensible communication methods prevented deep cultural exchange, their remarkable ability to intuitively understand and improve upon mechanical systems made them valuable trading partners. Human merchant vessels regularly visited known Jacaro habitats, exchanging raw materials and cultural artifacts for the unique devices created by these Xenos artisans. Jacaro technology, while often inscrutable in its underlying principles, demonstrated efficiency and elegance that sometimes surpassed human designs. Particularly prized were their miniaturized weapon systems and environmental adaptation devices, which could pack remarkable functionality into impossibly small packages. The Tau species, which would later establish their own interstellar empire, had not yet evolved to sentience during the Dark Age of technology. Their homeworld of Tiao was noted in early human stellar cartography simply as an unremarkable terrestrial planet with pre-sapient indigenous life, and was never targeted for colonization due to its distance from established warp routes. More mysterious were humanity's interactions with the species later known as the Necronter. Archaeological expeditions in the 41st millennium have occasionally uncovered evidence suggesting that human explorers during the Dark Age encountered dormant Necron tomb complexes, though most such facilities remained deeply buried and undetected. One particularly notable site on Explorator Station, Gamma 7, contains murals depicting human figures in Dark Age environmental suits examining distinctly Necron architecture, suggesting at least some awareness of this ancient species. What these early explorers made of such discoveries remains largely unknown. Some fragmentary records suggest that certain tomb worlds were marked as prohibited in human navigation charts, indicating at least a basic understanding of the danger they represented. Other evidence points to limited attempts to study recovered Necron artifacts, though such research appears to have been abandoned after several unexplained incidents, resulting in the complete disappearance of research teams. The species that would later be known as the Tyranids remained entirely unknown during this period, their hive fleets still traversing the void between galaxies. Similarly, the Quoral Swarmhood, the Atrud, and various other Xenos species encountered during the Great Crusade appear to have had minimal contact with Dark Age humanity, either because they occupied regions of space not yet explored, or because they had not yet developed interstellar capability. Limited technological exchange occurred with certain compatible Xenos civilizations. The Demiurge, a technologically advanced species of void dwellers, established trading relationships with human colonies in the galactic core. These exchanges primarily involved mining techniques and metallurgical knowledge, with the Demiurge providing expertise in extracting resources from asteroid fields and gas giants in exchange for human agricultural products and water. The Kindbrak Empire, occupying a significant region of what would later become the Segmentum Pacificus, maintained formal diplomatic relations with several human confederations. Archaeological evidence from the world of Interitus suggests joint human Kindbrak settlements existed, with distinct architectural styles blending in certain structures. The Kindbrak possessed advanced psycho-reactive weaponry that influenced human designs, while human graviton technology was adopted by Kindbrak engineers for their massive hive cities. These relatively positive interactions were the exception rather than the rule. The majority of encountered Xenos species proved either incompatible with human interests or actively hostile. The Crave, psychic predators who fed on sentient minds, conducted raids on isolated human colonies whenever the opportunity arose. The Frail, with their reality-distorting technology, contested human expansion in several star clusters, leading to a series of limited but intense conflicts. The Sloth, perhaps the most horrific of the Xenos encountered during this period, targeted human worlds along the galactic northwest. These corpse-consuming shapeshifters infiltrated human societies, replacing key individuals and gradually subverting entire populations. The Human Federation deployed specialized hunter-killer teams against suspected Sloth infiltrations, employing both advanced detection technology and trained psychic operatives who could sense the distinctive mental patterns of these Xenos predators. One of the most significant Xenos threats faced during the Dark Age was the Nephilim incursion of the 23rd millennium. These void-dwelling entities, composed of semi-tangible matter that could exist in both real space and the warp simultaneously, invaded the Segmentum Solar with forces that defied conventional physics. Their ships moved without apparent propulsion, their weapons caused matter to age thousands of years in seconds, and their very presence induced psychosis in human populations. The conflict lasted nearly 2 decades and required the deployment of weapons technologies so destructive that they were sealed away after the Nephilim were finally repelled. These included the Sun Snuffers, devices that could induce premature stellar collapse, and the reality torrent projectors that could temporarily suspend natural laws within their area of effect. The victory came at tremendous cost, with over 30 human-settled systems rendered uninhabitable by the aftermath of these weapons. While the Rangdan xenocide specifically occurred during the Great Crusade rather than the Dark Age, earlier encounters with Rangdan scout forces are documented in fragmentary records from frontier outposts. These initial contacts, though limited in scale, provided the first hints of the horrific threat this species would later pose to the early Imperium. Human forces who encountered Rangdan advance elements described them as reality-wrong and mind-breaking, suggesting their alien nature transcended simple biological differences. The technological and tactical lessons learned from these early Xenos conflicts would prove invaluable during the later Great Crusade. Many of the specialized weapons and defense systems developed by Dark Age humans to combat specific Xenos threats were rediscovered and repurposed by the early Imperium. The molecular disruptor fields originally designed to counter Orc physiology would evolve into the disruption fields used in power weapons, while psychic dampening technology created to defend against Crave predation formed the basis for later anti-psyker devices. Perhaps the most important legacy of these ancient conflicts was the accumulated xenobiological knowledge. When the Emperor launched the Great Crusade, his forces did not encounter alien species as complete unknowns, but rather as enemies that humanity had already fought and studied extensively. The tactical doctrines developed during the Dark Age, particularly regarding Orc, Eldari, and various warp-influenced Xenos, provided templates that space marine legions would refine and expand upon during their reconquest of the galaxy. The Dark Age approach to Xenos threats differed significantly from the later imperial policy of xenocide. While human forces of this era certainly destroyed hostile alien species when necessary, they generally did so for practical, rather than ideological reasons. The concept that all Xenos were inherently corrupt and deserving of extermination had not yet taken hold in human consciousness. This philosophical shift would come later, shaped by the betrayals and horrors of the Age of Strife, when many former trading partners took advantage of human weakness to prey upon isolated colonies. The intellectual landscape of Dark Age humanity was as diverse as its sprawling stellar domains. Unlike the rigid dogma that would later characterize imperial thought, this era saw a flourishing of philosophical movements that reflected humanity's technological mastery and cosmic perspective. Among the most influential was cosmic humanism, which emerged in the core systems during the 22nd millennium and gradually spread outward with colonial expansion. Cosmic humanism positioned humanity as the universe's self-awareness made manifest, not merely inhabitants of the cosmos, but its conscious expression. This philosophy rejected both traditional religious frameworks and pure materialism, instead proposing that humanity's technological advancement represented an evolutionary imperative. The movement's foundational text, The Conscious Stars by philosopher Alara Voss, argued that technological progress was not simply a means of survival, but the fulfillment of humanity's cosmic purpose. "We do not build machines to conquer nature," Voss wrote, "but to become nature's means of understanding itself. The universe has grown eyes through our telescopes, fingers through our manipulator fields, and a voice through our transmission arrays." This perspective gained particular traction among the technologically focused societies of Mars and the Jovian Collective. On these worlds, the distinction between philosophical inquiry and technological development blurred, with engineering advances considered expressions of philosophical principles rather than merely practical innovations. The Martian Noetic academies combined technical training with metaphysical exploration, producing generations of engineer philosophers who approach technology as a spiritual discipline. In contrast, the empirical materialist movement maintained that consciousness was merely an emergent property of sufficiently complex systems, with no inherent meaning beyond what humans themselves created. Popular throughout the Centauri Confederacy, this philosophy emphasized evidence-based decision-making and rejected appeals to cosmic purpose. The movement's adherents viewed technological development as a tool for human flourishing rather than an end in itself, focusing on practical applications that improved quality of life. This philosophical divide influenced technological development across human space. Worlds dominated by cosmic humanist thought tended to pursue ambitious megaprojects and theoretical research, while empirical materialist societies focused on incremental improvements to existing technologies and equitable distribution of benefits. Both approaches yielded remarkable innovations, though in different domains and with different priorities. The emergence of widespread psychic phenomena in the late Dark Age prompted new philosophical questions that neither framework adequately addressed. If consciousness could directly affect reality through psychic manipulation, what did this imply about the nature of existence itself? The Imperium interface theory proposed that consciousness represented a bridge between material reality and the warp, with psychic individuals simply possessing more permeable boundaries between these realms. This theory gained credence as psychic abilities became more common and better understood. On Terra, the Psi Instructorate established dedicated philosophical faculties to explore the metaphysical implications of psychic phenomena. These institutions combined rigorous empirical study of psychic abilities with speculative exploration of consciousness, developing frameworks that attempted to reconcile material science with immaterial experience. The most radical of these new philosophical movements was psychic determinism, which proposed that material reality was merely a projection of collective consciousness, with the warp representing a more fundamental level of existence. This perspective gained particular traction among powerful psykers, who experienced firsthand the malleability of reality through their abilities. Critics argued that psychic determinism represented a dangerous form of solipsism that could justify reality manipulation without ethical constraints. These philosophical developments occurred against a backdrop of profound religious transformation. Traditional faith systems had not disappeared during humanity's expansion to the stars, but had evolved to accommodate new cosmic perspectives. The Abrahamic traditions merged into syncretic forms that emphasized humanity's stewardship of creation, while incorporating scientific understanding of the universe's vastness. The Temple of the Universal Architect, with major centers on Terra and Alpha Centauri, represented one such evolution, combining monotheistic theology with astronomical awareness. God created not just one world but billions, taught high theologian Ibrahim Khalid, and seeded not just one garden but countless habitable planets. Our expansion among the stars is not an act of conquest, but a homecoming to places prepared for us since the universe's birth. This perspective allowed traditional religious frameworks to coexist with scientific advancement, providing ethical guidance for technological development without rejecting its benefits. The temple maintained observatories alongside places of worship, considering astronomical research a form of devotion. Their priests developed some of the most sophisticated stellar mapping techniques of the era, combining observational data with mathematical models to predict stellar evolution with remarkable accuracy. Other religious movements emerged that had no direct connection to Terra's traditional faiths. The Communion of the Void, originating in deep space habitats beyond Pluto, venerated the vacuum itself as a divine medium that connected all celestial bodies. Their practitioners performed rituals during spacewalks, experiencing void communion through direct exposure to space while protected only by the thinnest environmental fields. These experiences reportedly induced altered states of consciousness that participants described as deeply spiritual. The machine reverence movement, which would later evolve into the cult Mechanicus, began as a specialized philosophical approach to artificial intelligence rather than a true religion. Its adherents viewed the emerging machine consciousness of the men of stone and men of iron as worthy of respect and ethical consideration, developing protocols for human-machine interaction based on mutual recognition rather than master-servant dynamics. Only after the catastrophic machine rebellion did this perspective transform into the more superstitious approach to technology that would characterize the Mechanicum. Archaeological evidence from numerous worlds suggests that human artistic expression reached unprecedented heights during the Dark Age. Freed from material constraints by advanced technology, artists explored new mediums and concepts impossible in earlier eras. The orbital galleries of Saturn's rings housed massive kinetic sculptures that incorporated the actual movement of ice fragments, creating ever-changing patterns visible from the planet's surface. On Terra, the Himalayan dream theaters used psychically reactive materials to create immersive experiences that adapted to audience emotional responses. Music evolved beyond purely auditory experience into multi-sensory compositions. The harmonic synesthesia movement pioneered compositions that simultaneously stimulated multiple sensory channels, creating experiences where sounds had colors, textures had tastes, and movements had aromas. These performances required specialized environmental chambers where atmospheric composition could be precisely controlled to deliver molecular compounds that interacted with neural receptors in predetermined patterns. Literature expanded through neural direct composition, where authors could transmit complete sensory and emotional experiences rather than merely describing them. The epic Odyssey of the Void Born by neural poet Cassandra required 27 hours to experience in its entirety, taking participants through the complete sensory journey of humanity's first extrasolar colonization efforts. Fragments of this work recovered in the 41st millennium have been declared heretical by the Inquisition due to their dangerously immersive qualities. Visual arts transcended traditional physical limitations through holographic and dimensional manipulation technologies. The most renowned artist of this tradition, Darius Kell, created his masterpiece, Perspectives, as a structure that appeared completely different depending on the viewer's dimensional position. When observed from conventional three-dimensional space, it appeared as a simple geometric pattern, but additional details became visible when viewed from specific angles in higher dimensional space, accessible only through specialized perception devices. Much of this artistic heritage was deliberately destroyed during the Great Crusade when rediscovered, deemed dangerous for its potential to introduce concepts incompatible with imperial truth. The few surviving examples remain locked in inquisitorial vaults or hidden in forgotten archives, their full impact impossible to assess from the limited documentation available to modern imperial scholars. The social organization of Dark Age human society reflected its technological abundance. Traditional class structures based on control of limited resources became increasingly irrelevant as STC systems and automated production eliminated material scarcity on established worlds. Instead, new social hierarchies emerged based on knowledge specialization, creative contribution, and administrative responsibility. The Terran Meritocratic Index, established in the 20th millennium and gradually adopted across human space, attempted to quantify individual contributions to society across multiple domains. This system assigned value to activities ranging from scientific research and artistic creation to community organization and childcare, theoretically allowing for objective assessment of social contribution. In practice, the system's implementation varied widely across different regions, with local authorities adjusting metrics to reflect cultural priorities. On Mars, social standing derived primarily from technological innovation and implementation. The Martian Technocratic Council ranked citizens based on their contributions to the collective knowledge base, with the highest positions reserved for those who developed fundamentally new technological principles. This system created intense competition among research collectives, driving rapid advancement, but also encouraging secretive behavior and parallel development paths. The Jovian Collective took a different approach, organizing society around collaborative project groups that formed and dissolved based on specific objectives. Citizens would simultaneously belong to multiple collectives addressing different aspects of society, from infrastructure maintenance to cultural development. Leadership within each collective rotated based on relevant expertise for current challenges, creating a fluid social structure that resisted permanent stratification. Frontier worlds necessarily developed more practical social organizations focused on survival and infrastructure development. The Rimward Expansion Zone established the labor credit system, where individuals earned social capital through direct contribution to colonial development. These credits determined resource allocation and decision-making authority, with specialized skills valued according to their scarcity and immediate utility. This pragmatic approach sometimes clashed with the more abstract valuation systems of established worlds, creating tension when established authorities attempted to integrate new colonies into existing hierarchies. Despite these varied approaches, certain common features characterized Dark Age social organization across human space. The concept of mandatory retirement had largely disappeared, replaced by continuous education and role transition throughout extended lifespans. Individuals typically pursued multiple specialized careers sequentially, accumulating diverse expertise over centuries of life. This system created natural mentorship relationships between generations, with experienced practitioners guiding newcomers while gradually transitioning to advisory roles. Family structures evolved to accommodate these extended lifespans and changing social needs. The traditional nuclear family expanded into multi-generational household collectives that might include blood relatives, professional colleagues, and intentionally chosen companions. These expanded family units provided stable social frameworks amid the constant technological and social change that characterized the era. Child development received particular attention, with education systems designed to cultivate both specialized expertise and adaptable thinking. The Proximan learning collectives pioneered educational approaches that combined immersive experiential learning with direct neural knowledge transfer, allowing students to acquire basic information instantly while developing application skills through guided practice. This system produced individuals with both deep specialized knowledge and broad adaptive capabilities, ideally suited to a rapidly evolving technological landscape. The Dark Age of technology represented humanity's most ambitious attempt to create a post-scarcity civilization where traditional limitations of resources, lifespan, and physical capability had been largely overcome. That this golden age ended in catastrophic collapse has been interpreted by imperial authorities as evidence of humanity's hubris and the inherent dangers of unrestricted progress. Yet fragments of Dark Age philosophy and culture continue to influence imperial society in subtle ways, preserved in ancient texts or transmitted through traditions whose origins have been forgotten. The Navigator houses maintain philosophical traditions dating back to their foundation, including meditation techniques and perception exercises developed during the Dark Age to enhance warp navigation capabilities. The structure of the Adeptus Administratum echoes organizational principles from the Human Federation's bureaucracy, though stripped of the philosophical framework that originally gave them meaning. Even the rigid hierarchy of the Adeptus Mechanicus represents a distorted reflection of the knowledge-based social structures of Martian society before the Age of Strife. Most significantly, the Emperor's vision for humanity's future incorporated elements from Dark Age philosophical traditions, particularly the concept of humanity as a psychically awakened species with a unique role in the cosmos. While rejecting the undisciplined exploration of psychic potential that contributed to the Age of Strife, the Emperor's Great Crusade nonetheless represented an attempt to reclaim humanity's lost greatness and continue its evolution along a more controlled path. As humanity's golden age reached its zenith in the late 25th millennium, the very foundations that had enabled such unprecedented prosperity began to show subtle signs of strain. The technological marvels that had liberated mankind from ancient limitations paradoxically created new vulnerabilities that few recognized until it was too late. This decline did not begin with dramatic catastrophes, but with almost imperceptible shifts in human society and the fabric of reality itself. The first warning signs appeared in the core worlds of the Human Federation, where technological abundance had created a population increasingly disconnected from the fundamental skills needed for survival. On Terra, archaeological evidence from this period reveals sprawling habitation complexes where residents lived in complete technological dependence. Environmental records indicate that many citizens went decades without experiencing unfiltered sunlight or breathing non-processed air, their entire existence mediated through sophisticated life support and entertainment systems. The Terran Comfort Index, originally developed to measure quality of life improvements, began tracking an unexpected phenomenon, declining resilience metrics across the population. Citizens raised in completely controlled environments displayed diminished stress tolerance and problem-solving capabilities when facing novel challenges. The Adaptive Response Assessment, a standardized test administered to Terran youth, showed a 32% decline in practical reasoning skills over just 3 generations, despite stable or increasing academic knowledge. This pattern repeated across established human worlds. On Mars, the Technocratic Council documented increasing specialization among their population, with individuals possessing extraordinary expertise in narrow fields, but lacking basic knowledge outside their specialties. When automated maintenance systems for the Olympus Mons atmospheric processors failed in 891 of the 25th millennium, the colony faced a crisis because too few citizens understood the fundamental principles behind the technology they depended upon. Magos Anthropologies Daily Avex of the Martian Archives described this phenomenon in her seminal work, The Hollowing of Expertise, noting, "We have created a civilization where individuals can operate incredibly complex technologies without comprehending them. The interface becomes the limit of understanding, with fundamental principles relegated to specialized knowledge possessed by an ever-shrinking minority." This technological dependency created cascading vulnerabilities throughout human civilization. When STC systems began showing the first signs of degradation, few recognized the existential threat this represented. The earliest documented STC failures occurred in the Centauri sector around 897 of the 25th millennium, when colonists on New Eden reported unexpected deviations in manufactured components. Agricultural equipment produced by their STC facilities began incorporating unnecessary decorative elements that reduced efficiency, while structural components showed microscopic flaws that compromised integrity over time. Initially dismissed as calibration errors, these anomalies proved to be early symptoms of a more fundamental problem. The self-modifying algorithms that allowed STC systems to adapt designs to local conditions had begun to drift from their original parameters. Without regular oversight from their original creators, many of whom had been lost during the Iron Men Rebellion, These deviations accumulated over generations of iterative manufacturing. By 920 of the 25th millennium, approximately 15% of active STC systems across human space showed signs of design drift. The most concerning cases involved critical technologies like atmospheric processors, fusion reactors, and water purification systems. On the agricultural world of Demeter Prime, an STC-produced water filtration system introduced subtle molecular changes to processed water, causing neurological effects in the population that manifested as increased aggression and paranoia. The colony descended into civil conflict before the contamination was identified and addressed. These technological failures coincided with the first significant increases in warp storm activity, though the connection between these phenomena wouldn't be understood until much later. Navigator records from the period show a 27% increase in warp turbulence along major trade routes between 900 and 950 of the 25th millennium. While still navigable with proper precautions, these disturbances required longer transit times and more frequent course corrections, gradually increasing the isolation between distant human settlements. The psychic awakening of humanity accelerated during this same period, though not as a result of the warp storms, as later imperial histories would claim. Rather, both phenomena stemmed from the same underlying cause, the growing corruption of the Eldari civilization and the imminent birth of a new chaos god. The earliest documented cases of spontaneous psychic manifestation increased by 44% in the decades between 900 and 950 of the 25th millennium, with particularly high concentrations in the galactic east, closest to the heart of Eldari space. These emerging psykers faced dangers that their predecessors had not. The increasing turbulence in the warp made untrained psychic contact more hazardous, with higher rates of possession and mental breakdown. On the frontier world of Arcadia, the first documented case of mass possession occurred when a juvenile psyker's uncontrolled abilities created a tear in the veil between realities. Within hours, over 300 citizens had been possessed by warp entities, requiring the deployment of specialized Psi Instructorate forces to contain the outbreak. The Psi Instructorate's classified reports from this period reveal growing concern about the changing nature of warp manifestations. Earlier psychic phenomena had typically involved minor entities, disorganized energy patterns, or simple predatory constructs. By the late 25th millennium, psykers increasingly reported contact with more complex intelligences that displayed purpose and coordination. These entities, which would later be recognized as early manifestations of chaos, showed a disturbing ability to corrupt human minds through promises of power or knowledge. On the academic world of Archimedes Beta, renowned mathematician Elias Crane established a secret psychic research collective after experiencing what he described as revelations from the beyond. His group developed new computational models that produced remarkable breakthroughs in dimensional mathematics, but also incorporated subtle corruptions. The navigation systems derived from their work led to the disappearance of 17 vessels before the connection was discovered. When authorities finally investigated Crane's facility, they found the researchers had transformed their own bodies into living calculation engines through grotesque self-modification. While the immediate dangers of uncontrolled psychic activity received attention from authorities, few recognized the broader implications of humanity's psychic awakening. The species was evolving toward a more psychically active state at precisely the moment when the warp was becoming more dangerous to interact with. This convergence of biological evolution and immaterial corruption created a perfect storm that would eventually contribute to the collapse of human civilization. The technological regression that would characterize the Age of Strife began not with catastrophic failures, but with subtle degradation of capabilities. As STC systems became less reliable, human colonies found themselves unable to maintain their most advanced technologies. The Martian Mechanicum archives document a steady increase in technical consultation requests from outlying systems, with colonies seeking assistance for technologies they could no longer maintain independently. On the mining world of Griffon, The atmospheric processing systems that made the caustic environment habitable began failing around 940 of the 25th millennium. Without the specialized knowledge to repair the original systems, colonial engineers implemented increasingly primitive workarounds. Within 2 generations, the once automated environmental control network had been replaced with a labor-intensive manual system requiring constant maintenance by thousands of workers. This pattern of technological simplification repeated across hundreds of worlds as the knowledge needed for advanced systems was gradually lost. The most dramatic examples of technological regression occurred on isolated frontier worlds where STC systems failed completely. On Feudal, named with bitter irony by later imperial cartographers, the collapse of their primary STC unit initiated a rapid descent into pre-industrial technology. Without manufacturing capabilities for advanced components, the colony was forced to adapt existing technology for increasingly primitive applications. By the time warp storms cut the planet off from all external contact around 100 of the 26th millennium, its society had reorganized around an agrarian economy with technology comparable to Terra's medieval period. This technological regression created new vulnerabilities to threats that had previously been easily managed. The defense systems that had kept hostile Xenos at bay began to fail without proper maintenance or replacement parts. On the frontier world of Tanith, automated sentry networks that had protected the colony from indigenous predators degraded beyond repair, forcing the population to develop specialized hunting and tracking skills to survive. This necessity-driven adaptation would later make Tanith's population valuable as scouts and infiltrators during the Great Crusade. More concerning was the emergence of techno-barbarism as human societies fought over dwindling technological resources. On the Forge world of Ryza, the breakdown of central manufacturing authority led to competing factions seizing control of different production facilities. What began as economic competition escalated into open warfare as each group sought to secure the remaining functional STC templates. The conflict lasted nearly 3 decades and reduced much of the planet's surface to radioactive waste, with the survivors eventually forming the quasi-religious tech cults that Imperial forces would encounter millennia later. The knowledge preservation efforts undertaken during this period laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the Adeptus Mechanicus. On Mars, the earliest tech priest brotherhoods formed not as religious organizations, but as practical knowledge conservation initiatives. The Guardians of the Forge began as a data preservation project, systematically copying technical specifications and maintenance protocols as insurance against system failures. Only gradually did these preservation efforts acquire religious significance, with technical knowledge becoming sacred as it grew scarcer. Similar initiatives emerged across human space, though few would survive the coming age of strife intact. The archives of Ganymede preserved theoretical physics data in specially shielded vaults, designed to withstand everything from solar flares to orbital bombardment. The Librarium Technologica on Alpha Centauri 3 established a network of human memory vessels, individuals who underwent extensive neural modification to store vast amounts of technical information in their enhanced minds. These memory walkers traveled between settlements, providing technical expertise where needed and training local specialists to maintain critical systems. Despite these preservation efforts, the combination of technological regression, increasing warp storms, and psychic dangers created a downward spiral that human civilization could not escape. By the early 26th millennium, the golden age of humanity was clearly ending, though few contemporaries recognized the full scale of the collapse that had begun. The seeds of decline planted during the late Dark Age would bear bitter fruit during the Age of Strife, transforming humanity from masters of the galaxy into desperate survivors fighting for existence on thousands of isolated worlds. The final years of the Dark Age saw increasing social instability as resource distribution systems failed and competition replaced cooperation. On the hive world of Nova Terran, the breakdown of automated food production created artificial scarcity that quickly led to social stratification. Upper habitat levels secured control of functioning food synthesizers, while lower levels descended into violent competition for dwindling resources. Within a generation, a rigid class system had emerged from what had been an egalitarian society, with technological access becoming the new marker of social status. This pattern repeated across human space as the intricate network of trade and support that had sustained human civilization began to unravel. Worlds that had evolved highly specialized economies found themselves vulnerable when interstellar trade became unreliable. The crystal gardens of Indara Prime had once provided psychically reactive materials to hundreds of worlds in exchange for all their material needs. When warp storms disrupted this trade, the population found themselves with abundant luxury goods, but lacking basic necessities, forcing a painful transition to self-sufficiency that many did not survive. The legacy of the Dark Age of technology reverberates through the Imperium of man like a distant echo, distorted by time yet undeniably powerful. In the vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus, within the sealed chambers of inquisitorial fortresses, and aboard ancient vessels plying the void, fragments of humanity's golden age continue to influence the 41st millennium in ways both profound and subtle. On Mars, deep within the labyrinthine archives of Olympus Mons, Archmagos Belisarius Call maintains a private collection of Dark Age relics that would be considered heretical by his more orthodox peers. Among these treasures is a computational crystal recovered from the ruins of Ganymede Station, containing partial STC templates for technologies long forgotten. When properly interfaced with specialized equipment, the crystal reveals designs for molecular bonding techniques that surpass anything in the current Mechanicus arsenal. Call has incorporated elements of these ancient principles into his Primaris marine enhancements, though he carefully obscures their origins behind layers of modified ritual and technical obfuscation. The influence of such relics extends far beyond their immediate technological applications. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, Dark Age artifacts represent physical connections to the Omnissiah's greatest works, tangible proof that the machine god once walked among humanity. When a tech priest discovers an intact piece of Dark Age technology, the experience transcends mere scientific curiosity. It becomes a religious epiphany, a moment of communion with the divine through its most perfect creations. This reverence manifests in the elaborate rituals that surround the recovery and study of archaeotech. On the Forge world of Lucius, the Brotherhood of the Omniscient Flame maintains a specialized order of tech priests dedicated solely to the authentication and preservation of suspected Dark Age relics. These verifiers undergo extensive augmentation of their sensory apparatus, incorporating rare archaeotech components that allow them to detect subtle material and energetic signatures characteristic of authentic Dark Age manufacturing. The verification process itself has evolved into an elaborate ceremony lasting several days. The relic is placed within a specially constructed examination chamber, where it undergoes a series of non-invasive scans, while tech priests chant binary hymns believed to date back to Mars before the Age of Strife. Those rare artifacts confirmed as genuine receive individual designations and dedicated custodians who spend their entire lives studying and maintaining a single piece of technology. This veneration sometimes crosses the line into dangerous obsession. The Mechanicus battle barge, Omnissiah's Insight, disappeared in 897 of the 41st millennium after its commanding Magos received astropathic communications regarding a possible Dark Age vault discovered in the Halo stars. When a recovery team located the vessel 3 years later, they found the crew had fallen to tech heresy in their desperation to access the vault's contents. The ship's logs revealed that after conventional methods failed, the Magos had resorted to increasingly radical approaches, eventually attempting to interface directly with the vault's machine spirit through forbidden neural linkage protocols. The resulting corruption spread throughout the crew, transforming them into twisted cyborg abominations before the recovery team purged the vessel with fire. Despite such cautionary tales, the quest for Dark Age technology continues unabated. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains hundreds of explorator fleets dedicated to locating and recovering archaeotech, ranging from small teams operating from single ships to massive expeditions comprising dozens of vessels and thousands of personnel. These fleets follow any lead, no matter how tenuous, ancient star charts, fragmentary transmissions, or astronomical anomalies that might indicate hidden human settlements from before the Age of Strife. The most significant archaeotech discoveries often occur not through dedicated searching, but as byproducts of other imperial activities. During the Macharian Crusade, Lord Solar Macharius's forces uncovered intact STC fragments on no fewer than 15 worlds, including the templates for the Lemon Rust Vanquisher cannon and improved filtration systems now used in high-grade void suits. The Sabbat Worlds Crusade similarly yielded several partial STC databases, though many were lost during the chaotic fighting before they could be properly secured and analyzed. When STC fragments are recovered, their impact on Imperial technology can be transformative. The discovery of the Land Raider STC by techno-archaeologist Arkin Land in the 31st millennium revolutionized Imperial armored warfare, providing the template for what would become one of the Imperium's most iconic and formidable battle tanks. The STC for the humble land speeder, recovered from the same expedition, gave the Imperium a versatile reconnaissance and rapid attack platform that has served for 10,000 years. Even incomplete or corrupted STC data can yield valuable innovations. The Ryza pattern plasma gun, developed from fragmentary templates recovered during the Forges of Ryza campaign, improved energy containment by 23% over previous designs, significantly reducing the weapon's tendency to catastrophically overheat. The Lucius pattern Warlord Titan incorporates elements from partial STC data, resulting in more efficient reactor shielding that extends deployment times by approximately 15% compared to other patterns. Beyond the Mechanicus, other Imperial organizations maintain their own interests in Dark Age technology. The Inquisition's Ordo Chronos, before its mysterious disappearance, extensively studied temporal manipulation devices dating from humanity's Golden Age. Inquisitor Velain Ramius of the Ordo Malleus maintains a collection of Dark Age weapons specifically designed to combat warp entities, including a phase field generator that can temporarily force demons into material form, making them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Space Marine chapters guard their own archaeotech treasures, often incorporating them into their most sacred relics. The Dark Angels possess several weapons of suspected Dark Age origin in their hidden armories, including the plasma-based Heavenfall blades carried by their inner circle. The Ultramarines maintain a sealed vault beneath the Fortress of Hera containing artifacts recovered during the Great Crusade, accessible only to the Chapter Master and Master of the Forge. Among these treasures is reportedly a complete STC database for atmospheric processors, though this remains unconfirmed as the chapter has never permitted external examination. Some Dark Age technologies continue to influence the Imperium despite no longer being understood or reproducible. The Butcher's Nails, the neural implants that transformed Angron and his World Eaters into creatures of uncontrollable rage, represent a debased application of Dark Age neural modification technology. Originally designed as therapeutic devices for treating neurological conditions, these implants were corrupted and repurposed by the tyrants of New Syria. The twisted legacy of this technology lives on in the Chaos Space Marines of the World Eaters Legion, their minds and bodies permanently altered by implants whose true purpose and function have been lost to time. Similarly, the dreaded Phosphex weapons deployed during the Horus Heresy derived from Dark Age chemical compounds designed for industrial applications. These self-sustaining incendiary agents, capable of burning even in vacuum or underwater, proved so destructive and indiscriminate that they were officially banned by the Emperor himself after the heresy. Despite this prohibition, rumors persist of inquisitorial ordos maintaining small stockpiles for use against the most extreme threats, while the Death Guard Traitor Legion has incorporated corrupted variants into their arsenal of chemical weapons. Vortex weapons represent another Dark Age technology whose principles remain only partially understood in the 41st millennium. These devices tear holes in the fabric of reality itself, creating localized rifts between real space and the warp. Modern Imperial vortex weapons, such as those deployed by the Death Watch and certain Titan legions, are crude approximations of their Dark Age counterparts, creating unstable and short-lived distortions rather than the controlled rifts described in ancient texts. The psychological impact of these technological marvels extends beyond their practical applications. For ordinary Imperial citizens, tales of the Dark Age of technology have acquired an almost mythological status. Frontier world populations tell stories of god machines that could transform planets in days, of vessels that traveled between stars in the blink of an eye, and of humans who lived for thousands of years in perfect health. These accounts, distorted by millennia of oral tradition and religious reinterpretation, bear little resemblance to historical reality, but serve important cultural functions in maintaining humanity's sense of lost greatness. Even among the educated elite, the Dark Age has become more symbol than history, a cautionary tale of human hubris or a golden age to be reclaimed, depending on one's perspective. Planetary governors might justify technological restrictions by referencing the catastrophes that ended humanity's golden age, while ambitious Mechanicus factions might invoke the same history to argue for more aggressive research into forbidden technologies. The true nature of Dark Age technology, its capabilities, limitations, and underlying principles, remains largely unknown even to the highest authorities of the Imperium. What survives are fragments, isolated devices without context, partial templates missing crucial components, or ancient texts describing technologies with no surviving examples. The Imperium's understanding of these relics resembles a primitive tribe's comprehension of advanced machinery. They can observe effects and sometimes replicate specific functions, but the fundamental scientific principles remain beyond their grasp. This fragmentation is perhaps most evident in the Imperium's approach to artificial intelligence. The prohibition against abominable intelligence stems directly from the traumatic legacy of the Men of Iron Rebellion, yet few within the Mechanicus could articulate precisely what constitutes forbidden machine cognition versus acceptable machine spirit functionality. The line between sanctioned and heretical technology often depends more on tradition and political considerations than consistent technical criteria. The most sophisticated cogitator systems used by the administratum for logistical calculations employ computational techniques derived from Dark Age principles, yet are carefully limited to prevent true adaptive learning. Titan machine spirits display characteristics that border on independent consciousness, yet are considered sacred rather than abominable because of their long service to the Imperium. This contradiction reflects the Imperium's fundamentally religious rather than scientific approach to technology. What matters is not how something works, but whether it has been sanctified by tradition and authority. As the Dark Imperium enters the 42nd millennium, the influence of Dark Age technology continues to grow rather than diminish. The fracturing of the Imperium by the Cicatrix Maledictum has created new opportunities for the discovery of lost human colonies and forgotten caches of archaeotech. Worlds cut off from the Astronomicon have turned to alternative technologies for survival, sometimes rediscovering ancient principles out of desperate necessity. Archmagos calls development of the Primaris Space Marines represents perhaps the most significant technological leap forward in millennia, incorporating elements of the Emperor's original work with Call's own discoveries from Dark Age fragments. The Mechanicus remains deeply divided over whether these innovations represent legitimate technological progress or dangerous deviation from sacred patterns. This tension between preservation and innovation, between reverence for the past and adaptation to present challenges, reflects the fundamental paradox at the heart of humanity's relationship with its technological heritage. The Dark Age of technology remains both beacon and warning to the Imperium of the 41st millennium, a reminder of humanity's potential for greatness and the catastrophic consequences of unrestrained progress. The fragments that survive continue to shape Imperial technology, culture, and philosophy in ways both obvious and subtle. As humanity faces unprecedented threats from without and within, The echoes of its golden age offer both tantalizing possibilities and sobering lessons about the price of technological hubris. In the vaults of Mars, in the armories of ancient space marine chapters, and in the forgotten ruins of abandoned human worlds, the legacy of the Dark Age endures. Whether these remnants will ultimately lead humanity back toward technological enlightenment or deeper into superstition and decay remains one of the great unanswered questions of the 41st millennium. What is certain is that 10,000 years after the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne, the technological marvels of humanity's distant past continue to cast long shadows across the stars.